When a man walks up to a five-star restaurant on a rainy Thursday night in Beverly Hills, tired, hungry, just looking for a warm place to sit down and eat, the last thing he expects is to be turned away. But that is exactly what happened. The man at the door looked him up and down, saw the damp hair, saw the plain jacket, saw the jeans with the worn patch at the knee. No reservation, no fancy entrance, just a quiet guy who walked in from the rain. And the man at the door said, without even checking the reservation book, "I'm sorry, we're fully booked." There were 3 empty tables sitting right behind him. The man in the wet jacket saw them. His friend saw them. But neither of them said a word. The quiet man just gave a small nod. The kind of nod that isn't agreement, but patience. And he turned around and walked back out into the rain. And that should have been the end of it. Except it wasn't. Because that quiet man in the plain wet jacket, the one they just turned away like he was nobody, was Keanu Reeves, one of the most famous actors on the planet. A man who had given away $75 million of his own money to film crew workers without ever telling a single journalist. A man who had lost his daughter, lost the woman he loved, and still somehow came out the other side softer and more patient with the world. Not harder. See, and in the 10 minutes after that door closed in his face, he made one phone call. That one phone call set off a chain of events that would reach back 15 years into the past, into a shoebox on a closet shelf, and change the life of a young woman who had nothing to do with any of this. A young woman who had no idea that the man she had just watched get turned away from an empty table had already, years before she ever met him, paid for the best week of her father's life. She didn't know that yet. Nobody did. But the truth was sitting in that shoebox, waiting, and it was about to come out in a way that nobody in this story saw coming. Not the young woman, not her brother, and certainly not the man at the door who never once looked at the reservation book. Stay with us for the whole video, because what happens next is not what you think. And the moment it all connects, the rain, the focaccia, the letter, the shoebox, the scholarship, send one card in a black frame sitting on a host stand in Beverly Hills. That moment is going to hit you somewhere you didn't expect. This is the real story of what happened that night. And it starts on a Thursday evening on North Cannon Drive, when the rain hit the sidewalk like it was angry at something, and 2 men walked up to a heavy wooden door looking for nothing more than a warm place to sit. The rain hit the sidewalk of North Cannon Drive like it was angry at something. It was a Thursday evening, November 7th, 2019. The kind of night where the sky turns black before 5 o'clock and the wind pushes wet leaves against your shoes and you just want to be somewhere warm. Beverly Hills doesn't look the same in the rain. The fancy storefronts go blurry. The streetlights make orange smears on the wet road. But the restaurants, the ones with the heavy wooden doors and the candles inside, they glow. They look like something from a dream. Warm and golden and safe. And one of those restaurants was called Maison Dorée, French for Golden House. It sat at 346 North Cannon Drive like it owned the whole street. 5 stars on every website that mattered. Waiters in white jackets. Menus with no prices. Because if you had to check the price, you probably weren't the kind of person they wanted sitting at their tables. 2 men walked up to that heavy wooden door. The first man was tall, wearing a blue jacket that was good but not fancy. On his jeans had a worn patch near the left knee. His dark hair was damp from the rain and pushed back behind his ears. He had a quiet face. Not the kind of face that demanded anything from anyone. The kind of face that watches and listens and doesn't make a big deal about being in the room. The second man was his friend, James Whittaker, broad-shouldered, with a close-cut beard and careful eyes. James had known the first man for years. Long enough to know when he was in a good mood and when something was sitting heavy on his mind. Tonight, they just wanted dinner. No cameras, no reservations, just two men, a rainy Thursday, and the hope of something hot to eat. They pushed open the door. The warmth hit them first. Then the smell, garlic, butter, something sweet roasting somewhere in the back. Soft music, clinking glasses, the low sound of people having a good evening. Standing at the host stand was a man named Marcus Delgado. He had worked the front of house at Maison Dorée for 11 years. He wore a perfectly pressed dark suit and kept his chin slightly raised, like he was always looking down at something just below eye level. He considered himself the first and last word on who belonged inside that golden room. He looked at the two men. He took in the damp hair, the worn jeans, the plain jacket. No reservation, no call ahead. Just two men who walked in off the street from the rain. "Good evening," Marcus said. His smile was thin as paper. "Do you have a reservation?" "We don't," James said. "But we were hoping—" "I'm afraid we're fully booked." Marcus didn't touch the reservation book. He didn't even glance at it. "Every table is spoken for tonight. I'm so sorry." He was not sorry. Anyone standing there could feel that. James looked past Marcus into the restaurant. 3 empty tables sat in the back of the room, set with white cloth and candles, waiting for no one. James saw them. The man in the wet jacket saw them. Neither said a word. The man in the damp hair gave a small, slow nod. Not the nod of someone who agrees, but the nod of someone who is choosing patience over anger. He took one last look into the warm golden room. Then he turned around and walked back out into the rain. Marcus watched them go. He smoothed the front of his jacket, adjusted the reservation book that he had never opened, and turned back to his evening like nothing had happened. That should have been the end of it, except the man in the wet jacket was Keanu Reeves, and he had his phone out before he even reached the corner. James watched him from the side. He knew that look. Keanu wasn't angry, not the loud kind of angry anyway. His jaw was set just a little tighter than usual. His eyes were somewhere far ahead, thinking something through. James had seen that look before. It always meant something was about to happen. But before we get to what happened next, you need to understand who this man really was. Because most people think they know Keanu Reeves. They know the movies. Speed, 1994. The Bus That Couldn't Slow Down. The Matrix, 1999. The Man Who Bent the Rules of Reality with His Bare Hands. John Wick, 2014. The Quiet Man Nobody Should Have Made Angry. They know the posters, the slow-motion jumps, the black coat. What they don't always know is the other story, the real one. Keanu Charles Reeves was born on September 2nd, 1964, in Beirut, Lebanon. His father left the family when Keanu was just 3 years old. His mother, a kind, creative woman named Patricia, packed up her children and moved. Australia, New York, Toronto. Always moving, always starting over. School was hard. Keanu had dyslexia, which made reading feel like trying to see through foggy glass. Words scrambled, letters flipped. He got by, but not easily. He didn't fit neatly into any one group. He was too quiet for some rooms and too restless for others. But on stage, something opened up. When he was acting, none of the other stuff mattered. No scrambled words, no wrong city. Just the scene, the moment, and what was true inside it. He chased that feeling all the way to Hollywood. By the late 1990s, he was one of the most recognized faces on Earth. And then, life hit him in ways that no movie ever could. On December 24th, 1999, Christmas Eve, his daughter was born. On her name was Ava Archer Syme Reeves. She was stillborn. She never took a breath. Keanu held her anyway, because she was his. And then he had to let her go. 16 months later, in April 2001, his girlfriend Jennifer Syme died in a car accident on Cahuenga Boulevard in Los Angeles. She was 28 years old. Keanu was 36. He had already lost more than most people lose in an entire lifetime. He did not become hard after that. That is the part people don't always understand. He became quieter and more careful with people, like a man who had learned the brutal way that time is short and cruelty is a waste of it. There are real photographs of him on the New York City subway, sitting in a regular seat, backpack on his lap, just another person on the train. He has been seen eating lunch alone on street corners. He shows up to meet fans without bodyguards. He remembers names. In 2003, while filming The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions, he learned that the special effects and costume crews, the people behind the camera who worked brutal hours for standard wages, were not being paid what their work was worth. So he gave them $75 million of his own money from his earnings on those films. He never made an announcement. He never called a journalist. The crew members told the story years later, quietly. The way people tell stories about things they still can't fully believe happened. And he once said in an interview, "I have no idea what I'd spend more money on. I'm good." This was the man Marcus Delgado had just turned away from 3 empty tables. James Whittaker walked beside him in the rain, watching him scroll on his phone with 2 thumbs, deliberate and calm. "That was insulting," James said. "Yeah," Keanu said. He didn't look up. They walked half a block more. "You okay?" James asked. Keanu stopped walking. He stood under a streetlight, and the rain tapped the shoulders of his jacket. He looked back down the street toward the warm golden windows of Maison Dorée, glowing in the dark, like nothing had happened inside them at all. Then he looked at James, and something shifted in his face. Not anger, not hurt. Something quieter and more certain than either of those things. "I'm better than okay," he said. He looked back at his phone. "I want to know who owns that building," he said. "The whole building, not the restaurant." James stared at him. "Right now." "Right now." James opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded slowly, because he had known this man long enough to know that when Keanu Reeves said "right now," he meant it in a way that very few people ever really meant anything, but before either of them took another step. A door opened behind them. A side door, not the main entrance. And a young woman stepped out into the rain with a takeout bag and an expression like she was already second-guessing herself. Neither of them had noticed her before. They were about to. She was moving fast, half jogging across the wet pavement, one hand holding the takeout bag against her chest, and the other pushing a loose strand of dark hair out of her eyes. She wore her work uniform, black shirt, black apron, black shoes already soaked through at the toes. There was a small burn scar on her left wrist that caught the streetlight for just a second as she raised her hand. "Excuse me," she called out, a little breathless. "Excuse me. Please." Keanu and James both turned around. She stopped a few feet in front of them and took one full breath to steady herself. She looked at Keanu directly. Not in the way some people looked at him, wide-eyed, frozen, reaching for a phone. She looked at him the way you look at someone you owe an apology to. I work in there," she said, tilting her head back toward Maison Dorée. "I saw what happened at the door. I saw the whole thing." Nobody said anything. Rain ticked softly against the pavement around them. There were empty tables, she said. 3 of them. In the back. I counted them myself because I couldn't believe he was really going to— She stopped, pressed her lips together, started again. What he did wasn't right. And I stood there, and I didn't say anything, and I should have. So? She held out the bag. This isn't much. We had a cancelled order. Focaccia, olive oil, and a truffle cream pasta the kitchen made wrong, but honestly, it came out better than the right version. I just didn't want you to walk home in the rain with nothing. Keanu looked at the bag. He looked at her. Then he reached out and took it. Thank you, he said. Not in a polished way. Not the way someone says it at an awards ceremony with a microphone in front of them. In a plain, human way. And the way you say it when something actually lands. What's your name? He asked. Sophia, she said. Sophia Harrington. How long have you worked there, Sophia? 2 years, she said. 4 nights a week. She paused, then added, because silence made her nervous. I need the shifts. My brother's applying to college and I help with— Anyway. She stopped herself. That's not why I came out here. Why did you come out here? Keanu asked. He wasn't being sharp about it. He was genuinely asking. And Sophia thought about it for a second. Because my dad always said that if you see something wrong happening right in front of you and you don't do anything, you're part of it. And I didn't want to be part of that. James looked at Keanu. Keanu looked at Sophia. Your dad sounds like a smart man, Keanu said. Something moved across Sophia's face, quick and quiet, like a cloud crossing the sun. He was, she said. A beat of silence passed between them. The rain kept falling. Then Keanu reached into the bag, tore off a piece of focaccia, and ate it, standing there on the sidewalk in the rain, without ceremony or embarrassment. He held a piece out to James. James took it. They both chewed. James raised his eyebrows. That's actually really good. The bread or the moment? Keanu said. James almost smiled. Both? Keanu looked back at Sophia. You mentioned truffle pasta. Ronaldo made it, she said. He's the head chef. And he's been there 6 years, and he's the only reason that kitchen deserves its reputation. Marcus, the man at the door, he gets the credit. Ronaldo does the work. Keanu nodded slowly. He wasn't filing that information away casually. He was storing it the way a person stores something they plan to use, carefully and soon. Thank you, Sophia, he said again, for the food, and for coming out here. She nodded once, pulled her apron straight, and walked back toward the side door. She pushed it open, and the warm air of the kitchen rushed out around her and then disappeared as the door swung shut. She told herself to forget about it. She told herself it was a small thing, a bag of food, a quick conversation, 2 minutes in the rain. She was wrong about that in every way that matters. Because the moment she stepped back inside and retied her apron, Keanu Reeves turned to James Whittaker on that dark, wet sidewalk and said 4 words in a voice so steady it barely sounded like a decision at all. Just find me the owner. James pulled out his phone. And the Golden House on North Cannon Drive, which had no idea any of this was happening, was already beginning to change. It just didn't know it yet. By the time Keanu and James got back to the car, James had already started making calls. Not to journalists, not to anyone who would talk, to the kind of quiet, careful people who know how to find out who owns what in this city without making any noise about it. Los Angeles is full of those people. You just have to know which numbers to dial. By 10 o'clock that night, they had a name. Terrence Boulay, 67 years old. real estate investor, had owned the building at 346 North Cannon Drive since 2004. 15 years of collecting rent from one of Beverly Hills' most recognized restaurant addresses. He lived in a beach house in Malibu, with a wine collection and the calm, unhurried energy of a man who had made his money early and learned not to rush anything. But he had one habit his business partners all knew about. He checked his phone at midnight, every night. Old instinct from 30 years of watching international markets move while California slept. On the night of November 7th, 2019, his phone rang at exactly 12 minutes past midnight. Not an alert, an actual call. His personal attorney's name on the screen. He picked up. "This better be interesting," Terrence said. "It is," his attorney said. The conversation lasted 9 minutes. Terrence later recalled it almost word for word, the way people remember conversations that rearrange something inside them. He told the story himself in an interview with the Los Angeles Business Journal published in February 2020, and the details were precise in the way that only shock makes things precise. His attorney told him there was a buyer for the Cannon Drive property. Serious? Motivated. Wanting to move within the week. The offer was above market value, not insultingly high, not aggressively low, just fair and firm and completely clear in what it meant. "I want this. I'm ready. Don't waste my time and I won't waste yours." Terrence asked who the buyer was. His attorney told him. A long silence followed. "You're certain?" Terrence asked. "Completely," his attorney said. Terrence sat on the edge of his bed. Through the window, the Pacific Ocean was a black nothing stretching out to the horizon. He sat with that for a while. He thought about a charity dinner he had attended in 2014, a fundraiser for children's hospitals held at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. He had shaken a lot of hands that night, smiled at a lot of faces. One of them had been Keanu Reeves. Keanu had been quiet that evening, generous with his time. He had sat with a young boy in the hospital ward afterward, a boy none of the cameras followed, and stayed long past when the formal event ended. And Terrence remembered thinking, "That man doesn't do anything for the photograph." He remembered that now, sitting on his bed at midnight with the ocean outside his window. He told his attorney, yes. The paperwork was signed the following Tuesday, November 12, 2019. The building at 346 North Cannon Drive changed hands officially on November 19, 2019, exactly 12 days after two men had walked out of it into the rain with nothing but a bag of focaccia and one very quiet decision. The Marcus Delgado went to work the following Thursday in his pressed jacket. He smoothed his lapel at the host stand. He arranged his reservation book. He had absolutely no idea that the building he worked inside now belonged to the man he had turned away. And neither, not yet, did Sophia. On the Thursday after the building changed hands, she showed up for her shift the same way she always did. Black shirt, black apron, hair pulled back tight. She came in through the side door, the same door she had walked out of 11 days earlier with a bag of food and a decision she still wasn't sure had been wise. Nobody had said anything about that night. Not to her face, anyway. Marcus had looked at her a little differently when she came back in from the rain that evening. Sharper, more careful. But he hadn't said a word, and Sophia hadn't offered one. And the shift had ended, and the next one had come, and life had continued the way life does when you're working 4 nights a week and helping your brother with college applications and trying to keep all the small important things from falling apart at once. She had no idea anything had changed. The letter arrived on the morning of November 22nd, 2019. It came by courier, not email, not a phone call. A real envelope, cream-colored, and delivered by hand to the front desk of Maison Dorée before the lunch service began. It was addressed to the general manager, Diane Okafor. Diane had been running the back-end operations of Maison Dorée for 4 years. She was a precise, calm woman who kept the restaurant functioning the way a good engine functions, smoothly, quietly, without drama. She had nothing to do with the front door. She had nothing to do with Marcus, or the rain, or the empty tables. She opened the envelope at her desk, and she read the letter twice. It was short and plain and entirely clear. The building at 346 North Cannon Drive had changed ownership. New lease terms would follow shortly. The letter was signed on behalf of a private investment company called Arch and Oak Holdings. Diane set the letter down on her desk. She had been in the restaurant industry for 20 years. She had worked in kitchens and front of house and management offices. She had seen owners come and go, concepts rise and collapse, the head chefs storm out over seasoning disagreements. She understood this business in her bones. She read the letter one more time. Then she picked it up, walked out to the front of the house, and placed it on the host stand directly in front of Marcus Delgado, who was uncapping his pen to begin the evening reservation list. "You need to read this," she said. He picked it up. He read it. His face changed. Not all at once. It went through things slowly. Like a man climbing down a ladder in the dark, feeling for each rung with his foot before trusting his weight to it. Confusion first. Then understanding. Then something that wasn't quite fear, but lived right next door to it. "Is this because of—" he started. "Read it again," Diane said quietly. "Then come find me." She walked back to her office and closed the door behind her without another word. What happened to Marcus Delgado in the weeks that followed was never spoken about publicly by Keanu Reeves. Not once. No interview. No statement. No social media post positioning himself as the hero of the moment. That silence was itself a kind of statement. What is known comes from staff at the restaurant. Accounts gathered carefully by a food industry publication called Table and Trade in the spring of 2020. The accounts were consistent. The details matched. But Marcus resigned before December was out. He relocated to Scottsdale, Arizona, where he took a management position at a mid-range hotel. People who knew him said he was better suited to a role that kept him further from the judgment calls of a front door. Nobody argued with that. Ronaldo Vasquez, the head chef Sophia had mentioned in The Rain, the man who had been asking for creative control over the menu for 3 years and had been turned down each time, received a new contract within the month. Better pay. Full creative authority over every dish that left his kitchen. He read the contract in the break room alone and cried into his apron. He had stopped believing that was ever going to happen. The restaurant went through a quiet renovation in early 2020. Nothing loud or dramatic. Fresh paint, warmer lighting, and the kind of changes that make a room feel like it finally exhaled. The prices came back onto the menu. The reservation policy was changed. Walk-ins were now welcomed at any hour. And on the host stand, where Marcus used to arrange his reservation book without looking at it, a small framed card now sat. Black frame. White card. Clean, simple letters. Every guest who walks through this door deserves to feel welcome. No signature. No explanation. Nothing that pointed back to anyone. Just those words, sitting there quietly like they had always been there, and always should have been. Sophia noticed the card on her first shift after the renovation. She stood in front of it for a long time. Something about it made her chest feel tight, in a way she couldn't explain. Something about the plainness of it. The fact that it didn't try to be more than it was. She didn't know why it made her want to cry. She didn't know yet that she was the reason it existed. And she had no idea, could not have known, standing there in her black apron with her hair pulled back and her rent due in 5 days, that the most important part of this story hadn't happened yet. It was still coming, quietly, the way the most important things always come. To understand what was buried in Sophia Harrington's past, you have to go back to a man named David Harrington, her father. He was a big man with careful hands, the kind of hands that knew how to measure twice and cut once. He had grown up in Inglewood, California, the son of a plumber and a school librarian, and he had learned early that honest work done well was its own kind of dignity. He became a set carpenter in the Los Angeles film industry. He built the backgrounds that actors stood in front of, the walls, the floors, the staircases, the door frames that cameras swept past without a second look. Nobody ever saw David Harrington's name on a poster. He didn't mind. He liked the work, and he liked the smell of fresh timber and the weight of a good hammer and the quiet satisfaction of building something solid out of nothing. He was a good father, present in the way that counts. At school plays, at breakfast, at the kitchen table with a pen helping Sophia with math problems she pretended to find harder than she did because she liked the extra time with him. In the summer of 2014, he was diagnosed with cancer. He didn't tell the children right away, and he told their mother first, Linda Harrington, who had steady eyes and a soft voice, and who cried alone in the bathroom so the kids wouldn't hear. Together they decided to manage it quietly for as long as they could. David kept working. And somehow, on a set carpenter's wages, with medical bills beginning to stack like leaves after a storm, he managed things. He kept the lights on. He kept Eli in therapy. He kept Sophia's college applications moving. And in the summer of 2015, and when the doctors said the treatments were working, and there was real reason for hope, he took his family to San Diego for 5 days. It was the best trip of Sophia's life. Her father smiled the whole time, wide and real, like a man who had decided to be fully present in every single hour. They ate fish tacos on the boardwalk. Eli got sunburned on the second day and complained about it until David put aloe on his shoulders and told him that pain was just the body's way of remembering something beautiful. Sophia had never forgotten that. David Harrington died in March 2016. Sophia was 21. Eli was 14. After the funeral, after the casseroles stopped coming and the house went quiet, in the specific way that houses go quiet when someone essential is gone from them, Sophia went through her father's things. See, in a shoebox on the top shelf of his closet, she found papers, tax documents, old pay stubs, a photograph of her parents from before the children came, standing somewhere cold and laughing about something the camera hadn't caught. And a letter. It was from a production company. Clean letterhead. Professional language thanking David Harrington for his work and craftsmanship on a major film production. It referenced a bonus payment. A significant one. Well beyond anything a standard studio contract would have provided. Sophia read it twice. She didn't recognize the production company's name. The bonus amount was large enough to make her breath catch. Large enough, she realized slowly, to explain things she had never been able to explain. The San Diego trip, Eli's therapy, the months where the medical bills should have crushed them, but somehow hadn't. She folded the letter carefully. She put it back in the box. She moved that box twice over the following years, once when she left the family home, once when she moved to a smaller apartment closer to work. It came with her both times the way certain things do, not because you know why, but because putting them in a donation pile feels like a betrayal you can't explain. She thought of the letter sometimes. She assumed it was a standard studio bonus, a good year, a one-time thing that had come at exactly the right moment. But she had no idea it was anything more than that. She had no idea that in a few months' time, a woman she had never met would sit down at one of her tables and order a glass of Barolo and ask a question that would pull that letter out of the past like a thread pulled from a sweater. Slowly at first, and then all at once. Why, she had no idea that the man who had walked into her restaurant on a rainy Thursday night in November, the man she had followed out into the dark with a bag of focaccia and a conscience she couldn't quiet, had anything to do with her father's last good year. She had no idea at all. But the truth had been sitting in that shoebox for 4 years, waiting for her to be ready to find it. Priya Chandra arrived on a Wednesday evening in January 2020. She was 34 years old, and with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a worn leather notebook she carried everywhere like a second wallet. She worked for a long-form journalism outlet based in downtown Los Angeles. She had spent the last 4 months on a single investigation, one of those slow, patient pieces of reporting that most publications no longer had the stomach for. She was looking into how Hollywood's below-the-line workers had been compensated over the past 2 decades. The carpenters, the painters, the riggers, the people whose names rolled past in the credits while the audience was already putting on their coats. She had chosen Maison Dorée for dinner because a source had mentioned the restaurant's recent ownership change, and she was curious about it in the background. Professional way journalists are curious about everything. She was seated at table 7. Sophia took her order. Barolo, the truffle pasta. Ronaldo's version, now officially on the menu under his own name, and a small salad to start. They exchanged the ordinary words of a server and a customer and nothing more. But then Priya looked up from her notebook. She had been scribbling between courses, and asked the way journalists ask things, casually, but with both eyes open. "Did you grow up here? In Los Angeles?" "Inglewood," Sophia said. "Family still there?" "My mom? My brother?" A pause. "My dad passed a few years ago." "I'm sorry," Priya said, and she meant it. You could hear it. "What did he do?" "Set carpenter," Sophia said. "Film industry. He worked on a lot of productions in the early 2000s. Priya's pen stopped moving. She looked up slowly. "What was his name?" she asked. "David Harrington." The restaurant kept moving around them, glasses clinking, conversations overlapping, Ronaldo's food arriving at other tables in quiet procession. But at table 7, something had gone very still. Priya opened her notebook to a page near the middle. She turned it around and placed it flat on the table so Sophia could see. It was a list of names, 40, maybe 50 of them. Set carpenters, painters, costume technicians, lighting crew. Each name had a date beside it and a number. Sophia leaned forward and read. Halfway down the left column, in plain black ink, were 2 words she had known her whole life. David Harrington. Her hand reached out and touched the page without her deciding to. "What is this?" she whispered. "These are crew members," Priya said carefully, the way you speak to someone standing at the edge of something large, who received a personal bonus payment, voluntary, private, not from the studio, during post-production on the Matrix films in 2003. Most of them never found out who specifically authorized it. The money came through a holding company. Sophia looked up from the page. "Which holding company?" she asked. Priya turned the notebook back around. She wrote 2 words at the bottom of the page and slid it across the table one more time. Sophia read them. Arch and Oak. The room didn't spin. Nothing dramatic happened. But something shifted inside her chest. Something large and slow and quiet, like a door opening that had been sealed for a very long time. She untied her apron. She told the floor manager she needed 10 minutes. She went to the break room, sat down on the wooden bench beside the lockers, and pressed both hands flat against her knees, and breathed. Arch and Oak. The same name on the letter in the shoebox. The same name on the new ownership documents posted in the staff room 11 days after a rainy Thursday in November. The same name that now sat quietly on the lease of the building she worked inside every week. She had been circling this truth for 4 years without knowing it was there. And now it was right in front of her, plain as the name on the page. She went home that night and opened the box. It was sitting where it always sat, on the top shelf of her closet, behind a stack of folded sweaters, in the same place she had put it when she moved into this apartment 2 years ago. She pulled it down carefully, the way you handle things that belong to someone who is gone. She lifted the lid. The photograph was on top. Her parents, young and laughing somewhere cold. She set it aside gently. Beneath it, folded in thirds, was the letter. She unfolded it on the kitchen table under the overhead light and read it the way she had never read it before. Not as a grieving daughter looking for traces of her father, but as someone who finally knew what she was looking for. The letterhead was clean and plain. At the very top, small enough that she had passed over it a dozen times without registering it, were the words, Arch and Oak Holdings, on behalf of K. Reeves. She sat back in her chair. She thought about her father's hands, a big and careful and always slightly calloused at the palm. She thought about the way he had smiled in San Diego, wide and unhurried, like a man who had been given a gift he hadn't expected and was determined to use every bit of it. She thought about Eli getting aloe on his sunburned shoulders, and their father telling him that pain was just the body's way of remembering something beautiful. She thought about a rainy Thursday night in November. See a man in a wet jacket standing at a host stand being told there was no room. A bag of focaccia she had carried out into the dark because her father had raised her to do something when something wrong was happening right in front of her. A card in a black frame that had appeared on the host stand weeks later. Every guest who walks through this door deserves to feel welcome. She had thought that card was about a restaurant. She understood now that it was about something much older and much deeper than that. It was about what her father had believed his whole working life, that the people who build the backgrounds deserve to be seen, that the ones nobody photographs are still worth paying attention to. Keanu Reeves had believed that too. He had believed it in 2003 when he wrote the checks. He had believed it in November 2019 when he stood at a host stand in wet jeans and accepted a rejection without raising his voice. He had believed it when he took a bag of food from a young woman in the rain and listened, really listened, when she talked about her brother and her rent and a chef named Ronaldo who did the work while someone else took the credit. He had been paying attention the whole time. Sophia wrote him a letter that weekend. 3 paragraphs on plain white paper. She sealed it in an envelope and sent it to Arch and Oak Holdings with a handwritten note asking that it be forwarded. She didn't expect a reply within the month. She didn't know if she would get one at all. His response arrived in 12 days. It was handwritten, uneven, but deliberate. The writing of someone who thinks before each word. Sophia. I remember the focaccia, and I remember what you said about paying rent. I hope it's gotten easier. I didn't know whose daughter you were when we met in the rain. The world is smaller than we think, and sometimes it folds back on itself in ways that feel impossible. Your father was good at his work. Good work deserves to be paid for. The card in the frame was because of you. Not the pasta, though the pasta helped. Because you walked out into the rain when you didn't have to. Because you saw something wrong and you acted on it. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. Tsitsin K. Sophia read it 5 times at the kitchen table. Then she called Eli. "I have something to tell you," she said. "About Dad." Eli listened. He didn't speak for a long time after she finished. Then he said, quietly, the way their father used to say things that mattered. "So, the trip to San Diego? Dad knew where it came from?" "I don't think so," Sophia said. "I think it just came. The way good things sometimes do when someone decides to pay attention." There was a long silence on the line. Outside Sophia's window, Los Angeles glittered in the dark. 10 million lights burning in 10 million windows, each one a life, most of them invisible to everyone else. Eli had received his scholarship letter 3 days earlier from a foundation called the Arch and Oak Education Initiative, created in 2018 to support the children of below-the-line film workers. His father had registered both children years ago, quietly, the way David Harrington did everything that mattered. And neither of them had known. Neither of them had needed to. Because that is the whole point of this story. And it is not really about a restaurant or a building or a man being turned away from an empty table on a rainy night in Beverly Hills. It is about what happens when one person decides, without any audience and without any guarantee, to see the people that the rest of the world walks past. Keanu Reeves bought a building. But he had been building something much larger than that for a very long time. He just never stopped to take a photograph of it. Before you go, drop a comment below and tell us where you are watching from right now. It could be a cozy bedroom in Canada, a late-night kitchen in India, a quiet morning in Australia. Wherever you are, we want to know. And if this story made you feel something, if it reminded you that one small act of kindness can travel further than you ever imagined, give this video a like. It takes 1 second, and it helps more people find stories like this one. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Every story we tell is about real moments, real people, and the kind of quiet goodness that never makes the front page, but changes everything for someone, somewhere. And Keanu Reeves never made a press release about any of it. He never asked for the credit. So the least we can do is spread the story ourselves. 1 like, 1 subscription, 1 share with someone who needs to hear this today. That's how kindness travels. And now, click on the video appearing on your screen right now. We picked it just for you. And we think you're going to love it just as much as this one. We'll see you there.